Great, perfect. So, yeah, our next speaker is Alexis Lavail, and he's going to be telling us about another Spectral Polarimeter, the CRIRES Plus instrument. So please take
Exactly. Thank you. Can you see my slides, my mouse?
Yep.
Can you hear me well? Excellent. Cool. Thanks for having me. My name is Alexis Lavail, and I'm a Thunberg Fellow at Uppsala University and the Swedish Collegium for Advanced Study. And I thought there would be interest in the BCool crowd to hear a bit about this CRIRES Plus instrument at the Very Large Telescope, which we've been working on for many years now, and at last is on telescope and working. So my goal today is to give you kind of a quick practical overview of the instrument, where we are standing now. So we're still in the middle of commissioning at the telescope right now. What to expect, and put a lot of resources in there in the slides, which are actually online at the link at the top. So you can go back to them anytime when you write proposals and have resources. So I'm giving this talk also on behalf, of course, of the CRIRES Plus Consortium, which is lots of colleagues in Göttingen, Florence, Tottenberg, and at ESO, both in Garching and in Paraná. So I just wanted to start with all the resources there that I really invite you to go have a look if you're interested in CRIRES, but more particularly the user manual, which is the first link, which has all the practical information if you think about applying for time, and also the exposure time calculator, which is really useful and that I really recommend starting playing with now. All right. So just to get started, so CRIRES Plus, as many of you probably know, is not a new instrument. So it's a complete upgrade / refurbishment of the old CRIRES instrument, which was a first generation instrument at the Very Large Telescope that you can see depicted on the right side. So it's a high resolution near-infrared spectrograph with a resolving power of 100,000 or 50,000, according to the setting you choose. It's located at the Nasmyth focus of one of the UT of the Very Large Telescope. So we have an 8-meter diameter collecting power. So it's a slit spectrograph, like directly at the focus, and it's fed through an adaptive optics system. And it can observe from 950 nanometer to more than 5,000, so from Y band to M band. You just get a single order. So that means that you don't observe all of this at the same time. You observe just a narrow wavelength range. And then you move the Echelle grating and you scan the wavelength region like this. And it had a long slit as well, 40 arcsecond. And all the details are in the CRIRES paper from Uli Kaufel, 2004. So CRIRES was quite a great instrument, and a lot of very impressive science was done, particularly in exoplanet science, exoplanet atmosphere. But here I just wanted to show you a quick plot from a paper of mine 2 years ago, showing you that you can do quite cool magnetic field studies with it. So these are the titanium line that I think Sami was just mentioning in the K band, and the sodium line on the left. And you can see just beautiful Zeeman broadening at this high resolution. So it's a very nice instrument because you have a lot of flux and you have the high resolving power. But we're not here to talk about the old CRIRES. We're here to hear about the new CRIRES. The observing eye can see that the picture, so this is CRIRES Plus. It kind of looks like the old CRIRES, but don't be deceived. Most of the parts have been changed. So if you follow my mouse, on the right is basically the telescope. You have the Nasmyth adapter here. And this is the Nasmyth platform, so inside the dome of the telescope. You have the first warm optics in this black box here, where you have adaptive optics and you have the Spectral Polarimeter now and wavelength calibration. And then the magic happens in this cryostat that is here, so the cryogenically cooled part. It's not very big, it's less than 2 meters in diameter, so it's extremely packed, so everything is packed in this instrument. And in a nutshell, the upgrade consists of turning this into a spectral polarimeter. So we added a spectral polarimetry unit that we designed and built in Uppsala. We changed telescopes, so we're not at UT1 anymore of the VLT, we're at UT3, which I will talk about. It might have some consequence, some nice consequence in the future. The total wavelength range that you can observe is unchanged. You can still go up to the M band in spectroscopy, But if you want to do spectral polarimetry, then we are limited to the K band. So you can go from 950 to 2500 nanometers. And I think for most of you, the most interesting upgrade is that we changed the design of the spectrograph for a cross-dispersed spectrograph. So instead of just having one spectral order, we now get 6 or 10. So that means that you get much more data for your observing time, which is interesting. And the trade-off is that we had to settle for shorter slits, so a 10 arcsecond slit. And here, just a quick figure I made some time ago. I hope the numbers are still correct, to compare CRIRES Plus and Spirou, just to really settle in your minds that these are quite complementary instruments, and you should really check your science program and see which instrument/telescope is better for you. So with CRIRES Plus, you are at the very large telescope, so you have a bigger telescope, probably you get more flux, and you do have a higher spectral resolution. And in spectroscopy, you can go up to 5 microns. So if this is for you, then choose CRIRES Plus. But if what you want is very accurate radial velocity, have a lot of line at the same time, then probably Spirou is better for you. So just think about it. And basically, most of the improvements from this upgrade compared to the old CRIRES is that we have better throughput. So the instrument now is fairly efficient. We changed basically all of the mirrors. We have much better calibration capabilities. So we have gas cells that you can put into the optical path when you're observing the star. So this is quite good if you want to do radial velocity. We have a new uranium neon lamp and a Fabry-Perot étalon that we kind of light up as part of our daily calibrations. And a new metrology system because contrarily to Spirou, we have a lot of moving parts. And we want to make sure when we move these parts back and forth that they come back to the same place, so that your spectra are always taken at the kind of your spectral lines fall in the same place. The pipeline is also rewritten entirely from scratch, and this is based on the reduce package. So we have optimal extraction, etc., based on the paper from Nikolai Piskunov earlier this year. And as I say, we have larger spectral graphs, so more data for your observing time, and we have spectral polarimetry in Y, J, H, and K bands. So the current status, so the telescope, the instrument was installed at a telescope around a year ago, but then, as all of you know, COVID arrived and nothing happened. And from December and then January and February, we had 2 commissioning runs, which were done remotely for most of us. So this was very difficult, but we commissioned basically the spectroscopy mode. And we have 2 more commissioning runs, one in May and one in August, where we still have quite a lot of work to do. We have to commission spectral polarimetry, which we have not tested yet. A couple of observing modes, like if you want to, for example, guide on a star which is not your target, and also do the adaptive optics on that star. And also a big chunk will be the radial velocity performance, which we expect should be around 5 meters per second, but this has to be demonstrated. Of interest, perhaps, to some of you, there should be science verification in August with a call for proposal in May. And so this is open to everybody, and the data gets public straight away. So that can be very interesting. And CRIRES Plus was offered in the last ESO call for proposal. So it will start science observations this October in this ESO period 108. But this is limited to spectroscopy. And in the next period, so in 2022, then you should have all the modes that the instrument can offer, and this will be including spectral polarimetry. So in practice, and again, by contrast with Spirou, where you get all the wavelength range in one exposure, with CRIRES, you have to take different exposures, and you have standard wavelength settings, which have been chosen to cover the wavelength range. And the tips, you can check the exposure time calculator, which is interactive, to make sure that which kind of wavelength setting is best for you, for your science interest. And so what you see here are the 6 bands that you can observe with CRIRES Plus, Y, J, H, K, L, M. And so you can see, for example, in the Y band, with one standard setting, you cover the entire range. but because you have gaps between the three detectors, you want to make sure that the spectral lines through after, they don't fall into the gaps, because they always do if you don't check. So this is why we have two settings that are just slightly shifted to be able to have a full coverage. And the more you go into the red, the more the coverage is sparse. So the more you need settings. So first tip, and this you can already start doing now if you want, check the wavelength settings. Here I'm showing two extracted spectra of photometric standard in the K-band. Also, and this you can also do in the ETC, check the blaze, because what we do to change wavelength settings is that we move the axial grating, which means that you get different efficiencies. And so, for example, I don't know, if you're interested by a line at 2150 nanometer, as I show here, you're more interested to observe it in this wavelength setting than in this one, where you get very little flux. All right, so here are row exposures of a star that I like a lot, W Hydra. The top row is the Y band, and the bottom row is the K band. What is interesting to see is with all CRIRES, what you would get is basically one spectral order, so one line. And here you see basically the gain that we get with CRIRES Plus is we get all of these extra orders for free. And this is an illustration, direct illustration of the difference. So this is a spectra of TW Hydra, and the green one is the one you will get, or you would have gotten with old CRIRES, and the purple one is what you get now. So these are data from commissioning. So you get basically 6 times more data for free. And just wanted to show some spectra that we get. So these are extracted spectra for Proxima Sen. And as I mentioned in the wideband, as you can see at the top, you have continuous coverage of the wideband, except for the gaps between detectors. And the more you go into the red, the more you have these gaps, but you still get quite a lot of data. And you can go into K-band, you can also go into L-band, for example, around 4 microns, and you can also go to M-band. And this is quick schematics of the instrument, of the light path. And let's start from the top, which is the light coming from the telescope. So what you can do is you can first start to have a mirror directing to a calibration sphere, which you will not have during the observations, but you will have during calibrations. And then you can choose, for example, Fabry-Perot étalon for wavelength calibration, or halogen lamp for flat fields. But usually light goes through and first encounters a carriage, which by default is in a free position. So just the light comes through, but you have the possibility to put different optical elements into the optical path. And this is where the polarimeter is, as I will mention later on. And you have other things like the gas cell that you can put for radial velocity studies or uranium neon lamp. And light goes to the rotator and then reaches a dichroic. So the optical light is sent to a wavefront sensor, which does the adaptive optics and modify this mirror, while the near-infrared light goes into the cryostat and then goes through the slit. So you can choose a 0.4 arcsecond slit that gives you resolving power of 50,000, or a 0.2 arcsecond slit, which gives you 100,000. And then through the cross disperser, we have 6 of them, and the main axial grating, which does the main dispersion, and ends up on detector. And the reason I'm showing you this is, well, to familiarize you, but also to then switch to the polarimetry units, which maybe some of you will be interested in. And we really had to go for a very unusual design, simply because we had no choice. And the reason for this is that we have the spectral polarimetry unit, and then we have the adaptive optics. And the adaptive optics, which work in the optical, does not want to see 2 polarized beams. It wants to see 1 beam, close the loop, and make basically make a nice Gaussian. So we had to design a spectral polarimeter that is a spectral polarimeter in an infrared, but which is just a transparent piece of glass in the optical. So we use these polarization gratings manufactured by a company in the US called Imagine Optics. This is what polarization gratings looks like. And what it does is that below a cutoff wavelength, it does nothing, so it just let the light through. But above a cut of wavelength, it splits the light into this order m+1 and m-1 in opposite polarization state. And what happened is if you put a second polarization grating after this, then you end up with two parallel beams of opposite polarization. So you end up with a beam splitter. So this is what one of our beam splitter looks like. So it's two of these polarizing gratings. And we actually have four of them because the issue with these gratings is that they are chromatic. So we have gratings for Yj and gratings for Hk. And on top of that, we have different for circular polarization and linear polarization. So for circular polarization, we just have these two gratings and it's fine. And for linear polarization, we have a quarter wave plate in front of them. And this is how the spectral polarimetry unit looks like. So on the left, you see just a 3D model. And on the right, you see it sitting very tightly into the warm optic table. And so the idea is that you have 4 beam splitter installed on each side. And this entire turret is mounted on a motor that you can turn. And therefore choosing which one you want. So Yj circular or Yj linear or Hk circular, etc. So this is not something that you have to care as an observer. This is done by default, but it's just nice to show. And also each beam splitter is mounted on a motor like this one, a piezo motor that rotates it to do the beam switching, etc. So the design is pretty novel, but as a science user, it should not make a difference. You will just get your usual data with your Stokes profiles. And as I mentioned, we could not test spectral polarimetry yet, but we could do a sneaky test in the previous commissioning. So what you see here is a slit viewing image. So you see the slit in the middle, and you can see the two polarized beams. So these two are the two polarized star. This is TW Hydra, and you can see that the adaptive optics kind of works, and we get like this nice Gaussian. So the full commissioning for spectral polarimetry we'll do in a couple of weeks. All right, so I think I can leave you with some takeaway messages, and I'll be very happy to take any question.
Thank you, Alexis. Yeah, please, any questions for Alexis? Or maybe the talk was so comprehensive that there are.
I doubt it, but I mean, my slides are online and my contacts are there. So even if people have questions later on, in a couple of months or 2 days before the proposal deadline, just get in touch.
That is a dangerous offer you're giving out to the community, but
it's okay. I said they can contact me. I don't say I will answer.
Okay. Well, there you have it. Alexis may or may not answer your questions.